Dear XFL, when I found out a month ago that you were shutting down for good because of COVID-19, I didn't want to believe it. Life comes at you fast, and I haven't taken the time out to show my appreciation for the opportunity. So here it is. After hearing my name called on draft day in '08, just like any other young player, I thought a long and promising career was ahead for me. However, my reality has been setting records for getting cut. My recent NFL opportunities have came because a QB couldn't show up for work for one reason or another. In fact, I haven't been part of a team's top 2 QB rotation since 2013 in Cincy when we went to the playoffs and lost. It's been hard having one of the things I love most, aside from my family, cause a lot of heartbreak and disappointment. However, I'm not the one to complain because millions of people experience the same heartbreak and only a few of us get to play the game that we love. You changed that. The number of pro players grew. You allow so many guys like myself a place to play and show the world that we have what it takes. XFL players share a common thread. When you get cut, you question your ability, actions, and everything around you while you try to understand why things aren't going in your favor. The XFL was a new chance for all of us, an opportunity to change our stories. Even though my team, the LA Wildcats record ended up being 2-3, the everything is earned, nothing is given mentality never wavered. The LA Wildcats definitely leaned on each other, but the team made me the OG, and that was different for me. I can't thank our head coach Winston Moss and offensive coordinator Norm Chow enough for believing in me and trusting in me as a leader of the team. The season had its ups and downs to start, but by week 5, I felt that we had finally figured out how to keep just playing through adversity. We came back from a 17-point deficit and ran up the scoreboard against Tampa, and we promised all the Wildcat fans it was the beginning of a run that would never happen. COVID was touching down hard. That Wednesday after the game, the NBA shut down, and then it was our last practice. We were supposed to head to Seattle for week 6. The unknown had me spooked, and we went from we're about to make this run to how do I keep me and my family safe. After our practice that Thursday, we were told that that was the end of the season, and everyone went home the next day. It wasn't what anyone wanted, but we knew there was no choice. I feel for the players, the staff, the coaches, and the fans. The league was taking off. So much was going right, and it showed that spring football can work with the right pieces together, especially because of the dedicated fans that were the heartbeat of the league. They motivated us, and we played for them. So I'm closing as if this was my last run, even though it shouldn't be. My film shows that, NFL. I want to say thank you to the XFL, XFL fans, the city of LA, Carson, and everyone who was a part of the LA Wildcats organization. I grew in all aspects because of you, and for the couple games we played, the viewers got to see what can happen when people are given an opportunity, a second shot at their dreams. That's why so many XFL players are being signed to the NFL, and we even got a guy drafted. My hope is this: the spring football continues. By having spring ball, it allows pro caliber players to prove the old saying true: the eye in the sky doesn't lie. So many guys want a place to play, and the XFL provided us that home. So football, until we meet again, sincerely yours, Josh Headache Johnson.
What is up, my friends? Welcome to another edition of the XFL Week in Review. I'm your host, Mark Perry from XFL News Hub. Hello. On this week's show, an interview with XFL insider Mike Mitchell from XFL News Hub and plenty of other places. You've heard him there. We go in depth. You are not going to want to miss this interview. This was a lot of fun talking to him. It's the first time actually he and I have sat down and talked together. But we go from the beginning to the shutdown all the way to where we are right now. And he's got some stuff that I haven't heard before. So we'll go through all that, where we are right now today. And also we talk about the potential of Fox and Disney as buyers of the XFL. That was something I didn't hear. We talk about that in the program today. So how do you get in touch with the show? Well, you email podcast at XFL News Hub with your MP3 or videos, or you call 888-430-7692 extension 3. Don't worry about cutoff time. We always leave us a review on iTunes. We'll really appreciate that. The last time we spoke was April 13th, 2020. That was the last time we've talked. Since then, kind of pivoted. I mean, it's been a wild ride, all I can say is. And I explained it to Mike before our interview started, where it was almost like breaking up with a girlfriend. It's like, are we broken up yet? Is this over? Or is this not over? Like, what's going on? And the range of emotions over the last 2 months have been just insane. Without what's everybody's going on in the world, yet alone what's happening with the XFL, because we've all poured, all the guys on the staff, all the people behind the scenes with the XFL, everybody here, like we poured our hearts and soul into this league, and to have it just disappear like that, it's been tough. But it's been great to talk to Mike Mitchell, and he will fill you in on everything that has happened since Jeffrey Pollock's phone call leading up to that shut everything down, all the way to today's news. So we'll get all to that. What I'm doing, what have I been doing? Well, we're still focused on giving you the latest XFL news from XFL News Hub. We've covered everything that you can think of. I mean, we cover all the player signings. We were on it when Vince McMahon released a statement about the Oliver Luck lawsuit. All the players signing, Pep Hamilton being the coach, the QB coach of the Chargers. We're following everything that's going on in the XFL world, including what's going on with this auction bid, all the legal stuff. We got you covered. All the stuff about Oliver Luck and Vince McMahon will go into depth with Mike Mitchell. So we're here for you every step of the way. And it's really been one of those things where from the beginning till now, I personally thought that we would be, I was like, there's a 10% chance that this thing is going to survive. Now I'm starting to feel more. We'll get into those percentages later on in the show after our interview with Mike Mitchell. We have our XFL writers from Connor Falk to all the Matts and everybody on the team giving their take on a percentage. I asked them, what's the percentage you think the XFL is coming back? It'll be really interesting to hear from them. We'll get into that after the interview with Mike Mitchell. But what I've been up to is I kind of pivoted. And I always had in the back pocket, where I came from was pro wrestling. And I owned ImpactWrestling.com, sold that to TNA Wrestling. If you're a wrestling person, you know that. Sold All Wrestling, got rid of that. Now I started a site just as a precaution called Pro Wrestling News Hub. We are strictly an AEW, everything but the WWE at this point. Doing that. So I kind of pivoted. If you want to still hang out with me, I have a podcast, Pro Wrestling News Hub, every Thursday night. We talk AEW. It's a lot of fun. So if you're a wrestling fan, AEW's ratings have been great, and it's been fun doing that. But my heart is still always with the XFL. And after this conversation, all the news that's happened over the last week or so, I'm thinking we might be back, but we'll get into that later in the show. Plus, I have some emails that came through after things have shut down. Now, where are we going to go with right now? So right now on XFL News Hub, we're tracking all the players that get signed to XFL teams. If you want to check that out, we have our XFL player tracker, and it lists every single player from PJ Walker, Jordan Ta'amu, Kari Lee, everybody that gets signed, CFL guys, we track it all. That's on XFL News Hub. Plus, we follow all the latest news. Later on in the show, after our interview with Mike Mitchell, we'll break down all the key dates that are coming up as something that you need to consider. And around those dates is probably when we would have another podcast. There's really nothing to talk about, but a lot of people reached out to Mike. A lot of people reached out to me saying, you got to do a podcast, kind of update on what's going on. And we've given it to you right now. So without further ado, folks, let's just get into the interview, the blockbuster interview, in my opinion, with XFL insider extraordinaire, Mike Mitchell. All right, we're here with Mike Mitchell from XFL News Hub, XFL Board, and what other sites are you writing for right now?
Oh, I'm writing for. I'm a contributor for Fansided. I write for the Jets Press, and I also write for Overtime Heroics. I cover the Buffalo Bills, so a little busy on that end. But my heart's always been with the XFL, and it still is.
Yeah, I mean, for me too. Like, I mean, it's so this has been almost the only way I can compare it is like when you're breaking up with somebody. And you're like, are we broken up yet? And then wait, no, we're getting back together. Like, so take us down the path from when the league shut down, because you are the premier insider XFL guy, what happened from that point when the league started to shut down to where we're at now? Like, what was your inside look of all that stuff?
Well, it's pretty crazy because at the time the league, because initially nothing was canceled, it was suspended, and the Vince McMahon was planning to have games with no fans in attendance, and him and Oliver Luck butted heads on that premise, and they were going to have Seattle's game, which was upcoming in Week 6, at home with no fans there, and Vince McMahon was reaching out to members of the league to assure them, hey, we're still gonna invite fans, we're still gonna have games, and it wasn't up until the last second there that the league at that time was suspending operations, and then obviously a month later in April they canceled everything altogether. So everything happened so fast, and it sent us down this pathway that nobody expected. Nobody in the league, outside the league, obviously in the sports world, because of COVID-19 and everything else that shook up the entire world. So definitely.
Now, is that where the tension started between Oliver Luck and Vince McMahon?
Yeah, it started before the season happened. I'm sure most people have read this. Yeah. Antonio Callaway was signed. Right. He was signed by Joey Galloway, actually did XFL games. Antonio Callaway was signed by the XFL to play for the Tampa Bay Vipers. And he was given a hefty signing bonus, which was 6 figures, which was something that was reserved for the league's quarterbacks. Now, the XFL had earmarked specific salaries for each individual player and a specific payroll. And Oliver Luck, in Vince McMahon's eyes, McMahon felt that he overstepped his boundaries signing Callaway, who's a very talented player and was a good get for sure, to a deal where he was giving him a $125,000 bonus. This was done before the season started. Oliver wanted to get a little more attention on the league and add a talented player, which Callaway certainly is, although he's had off-the-field issues. And what happened was Vince McMahon advised Oliver Luck he was upset about the signing, about the 6-figure signing bonus for a receiver. And then obviously Callaway's background didn't help. So Vince told Oliver Luck to release Callaway. But what ended up happening was Callaway got injured in training camp with the Vipers. And at that point, because of insurance issues, you can't release him. Oh. So that's one of the, I want to say, sort of legit issues that were out there in the filing. We had the ridiculous cell phone dispute where and all that other stuff. I'm sure people have read about that. So that was kind of like just throwing something a little extra in the charge there. But there's no question that the XFL, that there were issues there between. I thought Oliver did a fantastic job, by the way. That's my personal opinion. I thought he was tremendous as the commissioner of the league. But there was some tension there. And then when COVID happened and Oliver Luck returned home, Vince McMahon, as you know, Mark, and a lot of people have followed him throughout the years, he's a hands-on kind of guy. So if he's got a right-hand man or a CEO or somebody who's in charge of the league, he wants you to be by his side and weathering the storm. He doesn't want you to, I don't want to put it this way, but tuck your tail and get out of Dodge. So, which is what Vince McMahon felt that Oliver Luck did when COVID-19 hit. He felt he rushed home. He didn't stay in Connecticut, didn't stay with him to confer about what steps the league was going to take, what options they had as far as resuming the league or bringing it back for a second season, etc. So there was a lot of tension there for sure.
Yeah, because I think it's something that you had wrote was that or I forget where it was, but it was like Vince McMahon reached out to Kevin Gilbride and said, no, we're playing. And then Gilbride was like, okay. And then all of a sudden he got a phone call like an hour or two later from somebody else saying that they weren't playing. And it was like,
what I heard from that story was that Vince, and then obviously I wrote that on the site there. That was from my article there about Oliver Luck, the firing and the lawsuit and all that. And yes, you're right. As you brought up, Vince McMahon reached out to Kevin Gilbride the day that the season was suspended. What I had heard during that whole situation was that Oliver was butting heads with Vince about canceling the season at that point, which was the right call as much as it hurt XFL followers and fans, considering where the world was headed at that point. So they had no choice but to suspend play. But Vince McMahon was fighting it every step of the way. And then Oliver Luck reached out to his media contacts, and he was kind of like to letting them know before the league officially announced it that we're suspending the season. And a lot of that stuff did not go over well with Vince. And then, he was left with no choice but to suspend play at that point. So they certainly butted heads, those two. It's a shame, but that's the way it went.
But was it really, but aside from the Antonio Callaway thing, during the season, was that relationship fine?
I think so. I think the Callaway deal was probably the biggest issue. 6-figure bonus to wide receiver position. They hadn't earmarked, and then also there was a whole character issue there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the COVID issue, the initial suspension of the season in March, I think is where they really butted heads, and just Oliver not sticking around in Connecticut and being by Vince McMahon's side and conferring with him and barely being able to be contacted by McMahon, and otherwise. So, Oliver made the decision, the state, to be with his family. And so you can respect that. But Vince McMahon as a boss, if he has somebody who's he's relying on as a top executive, he wants that person to be in the trenches with him when they're weathering the storm. That's his mentality. And Oliver wasn't. So
and that was it.
That created a lot of friction there for sure.
So then everything goes down and it gets shut down. Now the complicatedness of this shutdown and Chapter 11 wasn't something that they just threw together overnight. I mean, I know at the time they were looking at moving franchises and do you know anything about like the decision to not, I mean, this is my biggest question. Why not furlough everybody, or, why go down the path of Chapter 11?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and something that I've pondered and thought about as well. Essentially furloughing the entire league and then just coming back. That's always a possibility. The big thing that hit the league was, they lost so much money. The money they were going to need to float the league and pay for all the costs of operating it towards the end of the season and into year 2, be able to still pay employees and pay for all the expenses and the overheads and all that. They lost close to $30 million in game day revenue alone, not counting any other revenue they had coming their way. So that money was going to be used to obviously pay players for sure, but pay the coaches, executives, equipment people, medical people, technical staff, et cetera, and also help pay people leading into year 2. It was a devastating blow financially for the league because in order for them to get to year 2, they needed that revenue. They lost 20 regular season games and then the 3 playoff games. And as you know, following the league, as many people know, the league was expecting even bigger crowds in St. Louis, and the Battlehawks games were doing over $1 million at the gate.
Wow.
Yeah, so they were doing really well. So this was money that the league needed to continue on. And so when they didn't have that revenue, no fans, no revenue, and then no TV revenue. I mean, somewhat from sponsors, but not as traditional TV rights deal. So when they didn't have that money, that made it impossible for the Bills to still be paid, at least in the mind of Vince McMahon. And then importantly, like the board of directors that are involved with the WWE and Vince McMahon, there's a lot of pressure there to make business adjustments. And unfortunately, the XFL ended up being on the chopping block.
And then the letter goes to Oliver Luck. He's out. And then the 5-minute phone call from Jeffrey Pollack.
Right. And then
next.
All the employees are told that they're no longer working with the company. And then basically that was very difficult. It happened so fast and people were shocked and stunned by it. Executives like Daryl Johnson a day before were on radio shows talking about year 2. Pep Hamilton was making, even using quarantine to his advantage, or how to communicate with his players and his staff and getting ready for year 2 with the Defenders. He's now with the Chargers. But yeah, so that really hit everybody very hard. And then it got to that point, and I think, as we all know, I don't think we would be in this situation right now. Vince McMahon would still be owner of the league. They would have completed their first season and been moving on to year 2 if it wasn't for what happened with the coronavirus. We wouldn't be in this situation with a Chapter 11 bankruptcy and everything else that's going to follow.
Yeah. So then that all goes down. The Chapter 11 happens, the lawsuit with Vince McMahon and Oliver Luck and all that kind of dirtiness, business side of things. And then us as fans, and even me included, because I have people asking me all the time, is it coming back? And at that point, I'm like, there's a 10% shot, because in the language, I'm a software engineer by trade, and I've read through contracts before, and so I'm combing through these contracts, and there was something in there about Vince McMahon potentially. He was like part of it, but then he had to say that he wasn't fully as
Right.
part of the decision-making process because he might buy in. I mean, we reported that from the day that came out.
Right.
And so that seemed like Vince's plan was to buy back the league, or wasn't his plan? Like,
Yeah, it's kind of like up in the air because there are sources that I've spoken with that have said that he didn't have any plans to buy back the league, but there are other sources that told me that he wanted that option there in case. Obviously, he never thought he'd be in a position where he would be even in this discussion or scenario buying back a league, all that stuff. So the last month or 2 months, 3 months has been pretty crazy. Like these are scenarios that they never entertained and thought they would be entering into. So yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty there. And I guess Vince McMahon made it very clear this week with the filing by Alpha Entertainment earlier this week, basically stating that he will not be purchasing the XFL.
yeah, so now he's totally out. But then we get with these filings, and you're able to break that story with the documents that you got. Now all of a sudden there's a bunch of people that are interested in buying the league, and as a matter of fact, they've already thought about making sure that this sale can happen, so that they could have a 2021 season, and talking about this 12-week contest thing, and already plans without fans.
Yeah, because if you are a buyer, it's kind of interesting the timetable here. And I know we've posted the dates online in terms of the bid dates, the sale dates, the potential objection deadlines and all that. And it starts out on June 3rd and extends all the way till August 7th when there's a sale hearing. Hopefully it gets to that point where it is sold. So there's a lot of different hurdles for the league to encounter and to go through. But as we know at the moment, Houlihan Lokey sounds like a UK wrestler.
Yeah, it does sound like a wrestler.
But they are a respected investment banking firm, and they're handling the sale, and they distributed teasers to 235 potential purchasers, and 20 potential purchasers have executed NDAs and gained access to data. And then basically they can't disclose anything. It's confidentiality, but they have access to the league's assets and everything else. So that's helpful. And it sounds like 6 more potential companies may be coming on board. So we'll see who bids for the league and who doesn't. There's a lot of rumors and scuttlebutt out there about who could be involved. But yeah, it's a pretty extensive process, and there's a lot of different potential scenarios out there. Of course, you mentioned the 12-week thing that's been proposed, and that was in the filing, and the potential of a no-fan league with no fan attendance. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. It's kind of interesting that the sale process would be in August, because that's when we kind of will be finding out, will the NFL be selling tickets to their games? Will they be allowed to have fans? I think it's a benefit to the buyer of the XFL if you know for sure that you're going to have a source of revenue coming from fans attending games, even if it's not big crowds, being able to have 10, 15,000, 20,000 or what have you. That would be huge for any league out there. So trying to be profitable without fans is going to be difficult, especially for leagues that do not have TV contracts built in.
Yeah. So we have all these scenarios, potential buyers. I mean, what are some things you could tell us about? And can you tell us anything about these potential buyers at all?
Sure. I know that media companies have made inquiries on the possibility of purchasing the XFL. I do know that both Fox and Disney have inquired about. Now, I don't know. What I do not know is whether or not they're part of the 20 potential bidders and companies now that are in on the potential auction process. But I do know that Fox and Disney have shown interest in purchasing the XFL. And you would think that would make the most sense, because those two entities, those two companies would love to own and operate their own league. And they already have had a relationship with XFL, so they know the value of the league itself. And they were married to the concept. Those two networks got a lot of freedom in operating the XFL. They got to operate a league in the fashion that they wanted to, that they couldn't necessarily do with the NFL, like, for example, with gambling and the spreads and all the unprecedented access. So, and these networks came out before the XFL season started and talked about how happy they were to try all these different innovations as far as gambling goes, point spreads, extra access to the game. So that would make a lot of sense, and would be great news for the league if those two networks were to be involved in the bidding process or possibly potentially purchasing the XFL. And I think that's a scenario that Vince McMahon and his group would love, because he may be leaving the picture, but he would love to leave it in the hands of strong partners who would give the league great exposure and who have the funding, mind you, to be able to lose money in the early going, because any new owner that comes in is going to have to be willing to lose money for a couple years in order to see the league succeed. You can't have a flimsy kind of owner like Tom Dundon who's going to be there for 5 or 6 weeks and then say, you know what, this is not worth it, I'm out of here. You need a real owner that's committed and has the money financially to make it work.
Yeah. So one of the things that was interesting, and we kind of been, you and I have been in the media game for a little while here, is and his name escapes me. He's CBS. Posted an article about how the NFL,
Jason Lockenfora?
Yes, about how the NFL, and that it was a very lengthy kind of article. And I always believe, we'll put the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory on here, is that sometimes these guys will reach out to writers to have them throw an idea out there and see what the public kind of thinks of it. Now, would you think of like an NFL type?
That's a fascinating way to test the waters, and not impossible. I think that would be fascinating. I think I mentioned in a previous article a couple months back about the potential of the NFL buying the league, like what entities, what ownership could potentially make the league work. And I think a lot of the people that worked with the XFL, a lot of the broadcasters, Steve Levy and others, mentioned how the NFL should, after witnessing what happened with the XFL, the NFL should get in on it. I think it would be great news for the league, provided that the thing with the XFL that made it different from the NFL is it had its own individual spirit and was willing to be innovative and try new things. Now, with the NFL, purchase the XFL and allow it to still be the XFL and represent what it was without kind of forcing its own agenda. So I think anytime you have something as strong as the NFL start its own league here in the States, that's, they have the money to make it work, and obviously the TV partners to make it work. So, and that's great for players and coaches and everybody else involved. So I would love to see it happen. I just wonder what direction the NFL would take the XFL in if they were to purchase it.
Yeah, at first I was like, oh, that would be totally awesome if the NFL bought the XFL. And then the more I thought about, like you said, it's missing that, it would miss that, even though if somebody like Disney or Fox took it on, that like startup kind of feel to it. But then it goes, one of the other things is, so of course we have, and you and I both agree that I don't know if this league would be where it is today without Oliver Luck. And essentially Oliver Luck was somebody that the AAF wanted, and Oliver Luck said no. And I believe that that's where Vince McMahon heard the name Oliver Luck, was through his connections with the AAF when they were interested in maybe trying to purchase the XFL. Now that Vince has said he's going to have nothing to do with the XFL, I mean, before I thought, oh, if Vince buys the XFL, then there's no way Oliver Luck is coming back, and that's it. Now that Vince is out, what do you think, or have you been hearing anything about the chances of, like, what's Oliver Luck's status?
See, if I was part of a heavy media company, and I was purchasing the XFL myself, that's probably the first person I would call.
Yeah.
Is Oliver, and say, okay, you had your problems with Vince McMahon, I understand that, but you did a tremendous job for the league, and we want you to resume that role, and let's work out the financial details and all that kind of stuff. So he would be somebody you'd want to hire for sure, and I think he did a tremendous job with the league. So I think it's possible. It depends who the partners are. Like Oliver Luck had a lot of dealings. It depends who the new owners of the XFL are, because Oliver Luck had a lot of dealings with Fox and ESPN executives and all that, the current partners or the partners that the XFL had. So those guys know exactly what Oliver's all about, and they love him. And so if Fox were to purchase the league, I think they would look into bringing Oliver Luck back in the fold. And then Oliver Luck, a lot of the people that worked in the XFL, like Sam Schwartzstein and many others, were because of Oliver Luck. And of course, Bob Stoops and everybody else who ended up jumping on board. Because of Luck's reputation, he was able to sell people on the league. He had a hard time doing it with a lot of the coaches and stuff, but eventually he won them over with his vision, and he sold them on out the quality of the XFL and what it was going to be like. So, yeah, he would be somebody that would be on a very short list of people that you would want being the commissioner and running the league. And then obviously Oliver has a very strong relationship with teams and executives in the NFL. So he brokered a meeting with Roger Goodell back in, I want to say it was late 2018. So where Vince McMahon actually met with Roger Goodell. And so late 2018 there when the XFL announced their location. So Oliver is a top candidate for a new ownership group to look at if he's willing to go down this road again, obviously this time without Vince hovering over him.
Yeah, I think that would be the key. Now, what about a guy like Jeffrey Pollock, who it was kind of a surprise to a lot of us when this stuff came out, was that he's still on the payroll. And because it was surprising to me. I knew there was definitely something wrong when it was Jeffrey Pollock to make the announcement that they were shutting everything down. I'm like, where's Oliver Luck? Shouldn't he be the guy doing that? So is guys like Jeffrey Pollock, would they get picked up by whoever?
You'd have to consider him because he did like Jeffrey Pollock was essentially behind the scenes was a rock star for the league. And he came on pretty late. He came on, and he had to put together all the front offices and hire all the team presidents for, like the Heather Carrots and everybody else. And he hired all these great team presidents that the league had and put together the staff. And he did a lot of great work for the league, like working with Ticketmaster. And so Pollock is somebody you'd have to consider. He knows the league inside and out. And if you're going to reconstitute the league, then I think there's a good chance that now whether or not people want to come back or not. But I think there's a good chance that, you would use Jeffrey Pollock as someone who would recontact these individuals and see if they would be interested in coming back. The Ryan Gustafsons, the Kurt Henziger, everybody else who was involved with the league to see if you want to bring back a lot of these quality people. I know there's a lot of ifs in there, but Pollock is somebody that you'd have to consider too to remain in a prominent role, I think, if I was part of any ownership group.
Yeah. So what was the deal with him reaching out to Houston and St. Louis and Seattle? Because the initial article said was to restart the leases and that was when it dealt with St. Louis and Seattle. Then there was another one about using
a play that works.
Houston as an asset
Austin
in
Duke
this
is in for
Chapter
the
11
for the
thing.
Guardians.
Do you know anything about the deal with that?
Play.
Sure. From what I heard is that Jeffrey Pollock reached out to the different venues and partners of the league and said, okay, this is the process we're in. There's going to be a bid and potential sale. Let's not close the door on our relationships just yet. Let's put it on pause until we find out what the new ownership is. Because, if anyone purchases the league, they would definitely want to keep a relationship with St. Louis and Seattle and Houston. They would still own the trademarks of those teams, uniforms, etc. So the Battlehawks build up a very strong brand, so you'd want to keep that in play. And initially, the XFL had 3-year agreements with a lot of their venues. So I think Pollock and whomever else reached out basically told these venues that, let's not sever the relationship completely because we might still have a future together. Let's put this on pause until things get cleared up legally. And then perhaps if the league reconstitutes, we can resume our relationship. And the venues have nothing to lose. It's, like in St. Louis, they would love to have them back. So, you want to wait until the smoke clears. And then so it makes sense for someone like Jeffrey Pollock or someone in the XFL to reach out and say, let's keep this on hold for a second and see what happens. And then maybe we can get back into business with one another.
Yeah. So now on May 28th, 2020, based on what now, and I've asked the writers of XFL News Hub to give me their numbers, a percentage that you think that XFL will return in 2021.
Ooh.
What would you give it a percentage? Now, for me, I was at 10% a month ago, and my number has definitely shifted now. What would you think?
I would say like I was probably in that neighborhood that you mentioned initially, anywhere from 5 to 10%. I would say at the moment, I'll probably give it a 50% chance. A lot of what's going to need to happen is you want to make sure that whoever purchases the league actually has the ability to get exposure. You can buy the assets and the trademarks and purchase the assets, but you really need to develop partnerships with networks. You really need to develop partnerships with venues. These are not easy things to do. So you can purchase the assets, but to get everything up and running is not very easy. And, and so that's why I lean towards if one of the big networks that the XFL work with, or a big time owner, I don't know, the Cons maybe, if it was a big time ownership group were to purchase the league, I'd feel more confident in the league actually, because you can purchase the assets and say you're going to launch in 2021 and then never launch.
Yeah.
Because you can't lock down the agreements. There's been so many football leagues that have come up and down the road the last few decades that haven't been able to even launch. The Ricky Williams leagues, all these leagues. So they make bold claims, but they never get anything done because it's very difficult. So I would put it at 50%. Maybe I'm a little crazy. Put it at 50%, but I think the league will get sold. The question is who buys it. I think that's the most important equation. And whoever it is, the simple question is whoever buys it's got to be willing to lose money for a couple of years. And so you want it to be somebody who's strong, like somebody who has a strong financial background and can develop strong partnerships, and someone you can trust. That's easier said than done.
Yeah, I would laugh if Tony Khan bought the XFL and with AEW versus WWE, and that would be interesting. A dark horse is the company. Was it the Major League Football League?
Yeah, run by Frank Murtha. Yeah.
Yeah, because didn't they buy the AAF equipment out from when the XFL was bidding it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one to mention. That's somebody I certainly would have mentioned on the list of potential suitors. Now, whether or not he's actually made any bids, who knows? That being Frank Murtha, who's running Major League Football. Like I said, an individual like that, they can bid on the assets and perhaps win an auction for the assets. But whether or not they can line up partnerships with networks, with venues and agreements, that all remains to be seen. Major League Football has been something that's been postponed for several years now. So they're trying one step at a time, but it doesn't really have an infrastructure right now. It doesn't have a full executive team. Doesn't have a lot of things, locations, team names, all that.
Yeah.
So it's not easy. I mean, that individual, and I would love to see any other football entity come along. That individual might have a hard time of getting the league up and running, even if they were to find a way to purchase the assets. So it's interesting for sure. I know a lot of people have mentioned names like Mark Cuban. Some people have joked out there about what was his name, Bob Vanek, who wanted to reconstitute the XFL with Charlie Ebersol. People have mentioned the Ebersol family. Everybody's got all kinds of crazy theories. So, but I think the networks or the Cons would be interesting if they were to. The Khan family would be an interesting one to jump in the fray there. So it would be make for a hell of a storyline. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
In many ways, the AEW is kind of like, in many ways, it's kind of like the XFL of wrestling.
Yeah.
It's like the second pro league of wrestling league in this case. And, they do, I don't know what you would know this better than I do, Mark, but their viewership is anywhere from 700,000 a week to 1 million, maybe, depending on the week.
Well, I mean, since everything went down, it's been about 800, around 700,000 right now.
And, this is the big key. This is why networks would show interest, because they got renewed as well. Is that correct? They got renewed.
They're a couple of years. Yep.
Yeah. So that's the thing. In today's day and age, if you can do 800,000, 900,000 viewers, the networks will come after you. So that's why the XFL is a hot property. That's why people are surprised to see a few dozen companies show interest in it, because if you can carve out 1 million viewers, 1.5 million, that's valuable in today's day and age, because there's so much competition for viewership, for eyeballs, for attention, for driving traffic through social media to websites and everything else, and creating all those revenue streams that someone like AEW can come into the scene, do 1 million viewers, and boom, they got 2 more years on TNT, I believe they're on. So the XFL is kind of like in the same boat. People are looking at the property and saying, you know what, this kind of proven to do comparable or decent sports ratings compared to all the other leagues. And this can be a profitable model, and it can help our streaming networks and our networks and all that, and give us content is king. And
yes,
so
this is true.
It's very true. And especially in today's day and age, where there's so many viewing options. So the XFL, that's why they have more suitors, and people are kind of surprised by hearing that there's so many suitors out there. But that's why people are lining up to potentially make bids, because they want that content.
Whew. It's going to be a crazy summer. All right. So to wrap up, we got a couple of questions from fans out there for the great, iconic Mike Mitchell of the XFL world. So first up, Anthony Ebersine says, what's the likelihood the XFL is bought and has games in 2021. So we've already talked about that,
Right.
saying around 50%.
I think, if you're a fan of the XFL happening in 2021, then root for the NFL to happen. Which it looks like it's going to happen. They're going to have games. But if everything goes as planned and they're on schedule, and at some point they allow fans to the venues, then that means, okay, business is back in the sports world, and the XFL can get started in February or March, or maybe a little bit later than that. So that's the thing you got to root for, is if you see the NFL start on time and they have fans in their stadiums and all that, then that's a good sign for the XFL having games in 2021, rather than just doing a 12-week one-site tournament with no home field advantage kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that just even the NHL and Major League Baseball just trying, and NBA just trying to ramp up something little. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if the NFL plays a full season without any craziness, I mean, because, people are going to watch and see, okay, did COVID-19 hit the Green Bay Packers and half their team is sick or in quarantine, then that's a big deal. And that could definitely impact the XFL. All right. So Darren Du Bois says, should XFL make an effort to getting players right out of college and allowing them to participate in the NFL Combine if they are invited?
There's so many layers. That's a good question. Yeah. There's so many layers to that. I'll say this. We are headed there. Kenny Robinson was the first example of the future of the XFL. He was kind of like paving the way for the league to pick up college players and be a part of the XFL. Whoever the new owners are, depends who they are, they will have to make that decision. Well, how aggressive they're going to want to be in that department. We'll see if there's a college season this year. If there is, I think there will be. We'll see to what extent. But if there isn't a college football season, then there's going to be a lot of college football players out there hanging around, not being able to play, and probably looking at additional options.
Wow. I mean, if the NFL were to play, I mean, in college football is tough because it is spread out everywhere throughout the country.
Right.
If there's an issue with college football, that would make it very interesting. And so if there was no college football, NFL played its season, somebody big buys the XFL, and then the XFL comes after, those seniors in college, might want to, if they lost their senior year, play in the XFL.
Could be sophomores, could be juniors, could be the players that were in the transfer portal. A lot of people would take a look at somebody like Kenny Robinson, who was in the transfer portal, wasn't NFL draft eligible, and decided to go play in the XFL. And obviously he was drafted by the Carolina Panthers there in the 5th round, promising prospect. So I think, college players would consider it. I think the XFL was kind of headed down that road of every year adding more and more guys who are not eligible for the NFL to come in and play into the XFL. And Kenny Robinson was going to be the first of such. And it could happen. It all depends on the new owners. What direction. If you get an aggressive owner that comes in and says, hey, let's start aggressively going after college players, and that could be an interesting ball game there.
Yeah. All right. Final question. 2020 hindsight, who's a legend on the Twitter sphere of XFL. Who would be the best owner options for the league?
Oh, that's a great question.
I think I'm with you.
A lot of people will say NFL if you want it to survive long term. I want to say, take your choice between either Fox or Disney.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to agree with you there.
Yeah, I think because Fox even created a whole social media platform for the XFL. They're on Twitter and everywhere else, and they were very dedicated to the league, and they believed in the concept of it. Same thing with ESPN. So I think maybe it's wishful thinking, but you root for those networks because they have instant exposure. Even if a billionaire owner comes in and buys the assets of the XFL and decides that they're going to try to run something in 2021, there's no guarantee that they'll get TV, that they'll get streaming rights, that they'll be able to get exposure for the league. Not the kind of exposure that the XFL had. It was unprecedented for a first-year league to have weekly network games. So, so I would root for the best possible ownership would be Fox or Disney, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. So cool. Well, hey, Mike Mitchell, thanks so much for stopping by and being part of this special podcast that will go out, and we'll stay tuned for his writing. And thanks a lot for showing up.
Hey, it was a pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much.
What's up, XFL Army? If you're a fan of the XFL News Hub and you have a telephone, which I know all of you do because you're sitting there playing on your phones all the time, then why not download the XFL News Hub app? That's right, it's on iTunes. It's on Android. We have an Android version and an iPhone version of the XFL News Hub app. So what do you get? You get the latest news from XFL News Hub, the premier source of XFL news in the universe. Plus, you get push notifications when we have breaking news. You will be the first to know. You can leave a comment on some of the news right from your phone. Plus, you get this podcast on your phone as well. Remember, you can leave us reviews on the Google Play Store or iTunes. It links to other social media, our other social media accounts, and so much more. Be in the know. I know you're on your phones. People are on their phones all the time. They never get off their phones. So why not just download the XFL News Hub app on your Android or iPhone today? All you need to do is go to the Google Play Store or iTunes and just type in XFL News Hub. That's XFL News Hub. Download our app on your phone today. All right, we are back. So what did you think of the conversation I had with Mike Mitchell? I found it very fascinating. Fox Disney seems to be a great fit for the XFL. Potential Oliver Luck could return now that Vince is out. Everything is just wide open. Is the NFL a possibility of purchasing the XFL? 20 people so far we know, 20 entities are interested in the XFL. We've heard through Mike Mitchell, other sources saying that there's some big guns in there. Personally, I was at 10%. I'm like 30, 40% that the XFL could come back. So we're going to continue to follow this. We're going to continue to follow the players. I'm really interested in what's going on with their lives and signing the teams. It's been very quiet after the NFL draft. I thought more XFL players will sign, but I think as training camps start to open and things start to pop in the NFL world, we might see some more stuff there. Some key dates that I want you to remember before we get into some of our guys' XFL insider picks, if you will, about what the deal is and when and if possibly the XFL will come back. First up, we got, some key dates that you need to keep in mind. And you heard Mike Mitchell and myself talk about this stuff. So as everyone's enjoying the summer of 2020, XFL fans need to keep a keen eye on the following dates. These relate to the potential auction and perhaps restart of the XFL in 2020. You got to remember, part of what they're talking about and one of the squabbles that happened between the committee that's in charge of the Chapter 11 and Vince McMahon was that they wanted to extend it out until September or October. And Vince said, no, you got to capitalize it now. Jeffrey Pollack said, you got to capitalize it now. We need to wrap this sucker up by August so that you could potentially have a season in 2021. That's right. This is what they're hopeful. Jeffrey Pollack, Vince McMahon want a buyer in there that could potentially bring it back this year. So here are the dates that you need to check out. June 3rd, legal stuff. July 13th. So basically June is going to be quiet. July 13th, any kind of objections, whatever, we probably won't hear much. July 23rd is when things start to happen. It's called the stalking horse bid deadline. Again, I know nothing about this stuff, and I'm learning as we go along. So a stalking horse bid is an initial, this is from Investopedia. A stalking horse bid is an initial bid on the assets of a bankrupt company, i.e. the XFL. The bankrupt company will choose an entity from a pool of bidders who will make the first bid on the firm's remaining assets. So this is when we'll know, July 23rd, is that they'll set the price. So somebody will come in, let's just say it's me, XFL News Hub entity, and all you guys, and we all get together and we say, hey, based on looking at the data, we're going to set the price at $1 million. And everybody who's listening is going to pay for that, not me. Then other players will come in, somebody like the NFL, hopefully not like a Tom Dundon type, maybe Major League Football as a potential guys will come in, and then the bidding starts. They'll submit their bids. Then the auction will happen. The submitting the bid deadline will be July 30th. August 3rd will be the auction. That will start, and then we'll know when and who the new owner of the XFL is, August 7th, 2020, around 10 a.m. I have a feeling, just because this is the media, this, between July, the end of July, and early August, we'll get some leaked names and some leaked stuff going on there. But right now, I mean, we're talking 20 potential bidders already and 6 more on the way. Plus, as time goes on, we could potentially even getting more. So you could potentially have 30 bidders going on here. So keep an eye out. The real action will start July 23rd. Also, this is when the NFL season will start to kind of ramp up. And then we'll go all the way to August 7th is when we'll find out who the XFL, potential new XFL owner could be. Crazy. Crazy, crazy time, my friends. I don't even know what to tell you. All right, well, I will tell you. So my personal opinion on the percentages of the XFL returning, I'm at 35, 40%. I know I'm being cheesy. I was at 10 not too long ago. And now I'm at that 35, 40%. I'd be curious. Message me, message us on social media, message us in the comments on YouTube, Twitter, hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you see this, and give us your percentage of what you think of the XFL is coming back. Now, Jesse Simpson gave it 50%. Matt Nagashima gave it 65%. Matthew Shapiro, and these are all XFL News Hub writers. First, he said 30 to 40%. Since there are people trying to buy the league, I think it will be bought. Just a matter of if it can reach the potential it was before. This is a great point, which is something that Mike Mitchell and I talked about is, you know, are you going to have a dud buyer who buys it and then they just sit on it and it dies? Or are you going to have somebody like a Disney, Fox, NFL that comes in, puts the money in, and we can turn the sucker around and we're back in business? He said later on he changed it to 50%. He said he didn't realize how many bids were there. And if there's bids, I don't see why it wouldn't restart. And I agree with you there with Matthew Shapiro. I mean, somebody's going to buy it. And they're not going to get it for dirt cheap. And they got to be ready to rock and roll. All the indications is like, hey, we're going to sell this sucker. And you need to turn the switch on and let's go. Rod Villagomez, I'm going to be optimistic and say 80%. He's all in, which would be, hey, I'm kind of agreeing with you. If you have 30 people and the numbers are right, and Oliver Luck did his job, and Vince McMahon and Jeffrey Pollock all had said that this league would still be running if it wasn't for whatever was going on. Why wouldn't somebody sweep this up and make it happen? Connor Folk, superstar XFL insider, gave it 40%. Brian Lombardo, he's on the lower end. He says 25%. He's being a little cautiously optimistic. I think some of us, a lot of us on XFL News Hub were really hurt. I mean, we were really bummed. And it was still bothering all of us. And I'm sure, I can't imagine the people that are working for the XFL, how they're feeling. Zach Schrum goes 55%. So you could see your friends over at XFL News Hub have a pretty good, we were all like 10%, 5%. And now we're feeling pretty good. After talking to Mike Mitchell and hearing about some of these other potential guys, I'm feeling even better. It'd be really interesting to see. Now, let's get to some of your social media stuff. We'll just real quick. We answered a bunch of your questions in the interview, but I just wanted to get through a couple of emails. First, Scott, talking about the XFL. He says, thank you for an exciting and excellent season. I'm a season ticket holder for the DC Defenders, as was I. I appreciate the league and teams looking out for the fans and caring about our families in these unprecedented times. Also, you care for the safety and health of your league players, personnel, staff, and all who work to make this happen is another reason I will be a returning fan for the 2021 season. This was before everything went down. I know that you are refunding the remaining balance of season tickets to help those who had lost incomes, which now we know that that wasn't the case. To me, that speaks volumes of your integrity and so many others. My word is my bond. Your organization has made me a true fan of me, and I look forward to seeing everyone again when this whole thing dissipates. Wishing your entire organization, staff, their family and friends, all the fans, supporters, health, happiness, and support. Scott, checking in on the social media stuff. We appreciate that. Jamal Khashoggi, there has to be hope, Mark. I know you saw the news, but there has to be another season. I agree. And I think it's important that us at XFL News Hub continue to cover the XFL because potential buyers are checking our stuff out and seeing if there's fan interest. And I will tell you, Dick's Sporting Goods this past week and last week had a nice little sale on XFL merch. And you don't think I went and bought it. We promoted the heck out of it on social media today. So keep an eye out on Dick's Sporting Goods because their merch is selling out, which is a good thing, especially if there's a chance it comes back. We didn't see this with the AAF at all. We did not see this at all. They were done. Anthony says, I want to thank all the XFL staff and players. This league really did make me fall in love with football again. Please don't end the XFL Guardians for life. There's just so much out there. The fans love this league, and it was only for 5 games. I think the best case scenario for the XFL to survive in a good way is your Fox and Disney purchase the XFL and bring Oliver Luck back. That and then Jeffrey Pollock back. Get the band back together and make some tweaks and we'll be good to go. Disney has Pixar. Disney has ESPN. Disney is a big corporation that knows how to hire the top people. I mean, look at the Avenger movies. Star Wars isn't so much. But knows how to put the right person in charge of whatever entity is under this big conglomerate and make it happen. The other reason why, and something Mike Mitchell and I touched on, later on we had a conversation off the air there, talking about ratings and how something like the AEW had good ratings and, 800,000 viewers, ranked 4th this week in cable on Wednesday night. NXT was 24th. Just going to put it out there. That you got this, and TNT signed a new 2 or 3 year agreement, $40 million a year or something for AEW programming. Could you imagine something that brings in 4 of those every weekend? That's value. And if I am Disney and Fox and whatever, not only do I get live sports and football, which everybody loves, you talk about the top 5 pastimes in the United States, NFL and college football is 2. I mean, Major League Baseball, I mean, these guys are incredible. No. What else? Golf, NBA, NHL, they're all kind of down there. MLS. XFL could poise to be the number 3 sport in the country. And if I'm Fox and Disney and I'm negotiating with the NFL and I'm like, well, so let's get this straight, NFL. You want me to pay $2 billion to air your programming, which does great ratings and it's a home run. But all the costs and everything that is involved with me showing your NFL stuff, I can have my own league. And let's say after all that $2 billion and all the costs of this, that, and the other thing, my profit is $10 million a show. I'm making up a number. But I can have the XFL run the same deal. I get prime time on every channel, not your local games. and your local networks. I'm actually getting national exposure versus local. And I'm making $8 million a game with not even have to front you $2 billion. Doesn't that give me leverage against the NFL? And if I'm ESPN and Fox, that leaves CBS, Amazon, NFL Network, NBC. You know? Wouldn't that affect the negotiations with the NFL? It has to. It has to. And then now, after I've just brought this up to you, now what do you think about if you're the NFL? Well, I don't want to have that. I don't want to have the XFL used against me. Disney could ramp up 16 teams if they wanted to, real quick, with Oliver Luck in charge. Maybe I should buy the XFL so that I could fend off a potential bargaining chip used against me later. Now, live sports is basically the only thing that's keeping the cable companies in business at this point with the cord cutters. Even with everything that's going on, cord cutting is still occurring. My cable bill, they basically threw in cable television for free. It's really, I'm paying for the internet and I'm getting cable television for free. And then you see those fees, those sports fees. I didn't get that $15 a month back because the Orioles and Nationals aren't playing baseball anymore. Something to think about. And it's something that there's just so much going on. This is insane. But we're going to cover it all the way through. So that's just my take of potential a buyer. So what we want is a strong buyer and not some Tom Dundon type, no offense, but yes offense, that comes in, buys it, and then doesn't have the stroke to get it to see the light of day. So we really need, and whoever's interested in buying the XFL, honestly, the only way you're going to make it win is you got to bring guys like Oliver Luck back into the fold. Let him deal with his squabble with Vince. Bring him back. Players like Disney, Fox, ESPN, bring in the XFL. It gives them good ratings. They own the franchise. They own the relationships. They're in good shape. They have a sports entity that they own, unlike beholding to the NCAA, Major League Baseball, NBA. And that could be a bargaining chip across the board. ESPN Baseball wants to do something with you, and you're like, I've got the XFL, and I don't even have to pay the enormous amount of money that you want. There's so many variables to this, my friends. And hey, we'll get back together. We'll talk again when it comes to the XFL stuff. So I appreciate you just stopping by. I'm glad we were able to get this up going. We are everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, the whole deal. XFL News Hub, we're everywhere. Download our apps, the iPhone, the Android apps. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll appreciate it. Show notes, xflnewshub.com/xfl-podcast. Join our Discord. There is that in the show notes and everywhere. Join our Discord. There's some good conversations going on with that as well. We are working, and I've said this before, I was in the middle of working on a fantasy football app for XFL News Hub when this all went down. And now I have not stopped working on it. So if we come back, you have a home to play your fantasy football. And you can tell me what you wanted to do, and I can do it. So that's something I've been working on the weekends, and it's cool. And I want to use it. And I want you guys to use it. So that's it for me. For a special super thank you to Mike Mitchell for joining us on the show. We're going to reach out to him again as these dates, especially in July and August, you'll be hearing out from another podcast. We'll try to get some of the other XFL News Hub writers on this. As news breaks, we're here with you. We're still here with you. We were the ones that were reporting, even after everything shut down, articles about every single player that signs with another team. We're all in. We're going to be there until the end. And we thought it was over, and it's not. Did I think I was going to come back and doing a podcast? No, my friends, I did not think we would be doing that. So thanks for listening, y'all. God bless. Mahalo. And the next time we do this show, until then, I will see you all later.